I came home a day early, not because of instinct or mother's intuition, but because a client meeting in Austin had been canceled, and suddenly I had a free night. I thought I'd surprise Charlotte with donuts in the morning. My hand turned the key slowly in the lock, as though I were bracing for something. But I never expected this. 2 uniformed officers were in my living room. One scribbled notes on a pad. The other crouched at eye level with my 5-year-old Charlotte, who was curled up on the edge of the couch, arms pinned to her sides, head bowed, as if waiting for a sentence. My mother Phyllis stood nearby with folded arms, her posture sharp as a gavel. My sister Kendra held her own daughter Nora in her lap, stroking her hair while Nora sniffled into her shoulder with practiced theatrics. "Good morning," the young officer said as I froze in the doorway. "You must be Mrs. Cross." "Charlotte's mother." "Yes. What's going on here?" He shifted slightly, positioning himself between me and my child. "Not aggressive, protective? Everything's all right. We were responding to a call. There was a report of a dispute between children. One pushed the other. There was crying. We were told you were out of town, so we've been speaking with your mother and sister." I locked eyes with my mother. "You called the police on a 5-year-old. She hit Nora." Kendra interjected as though correcting a record. "She fell. She cried really hard." Nora peeked from Kendra's shoulder mid-cracker bite, watching Charlotte like a victor. Charlotte still hadn't looked up. Her little body shook. I walked over, sat beside her, and pulled her into a hug. She clung to me instantly. "She didn't hit," I said. She pushed my mother, corrected in a cold tone. "We tried talking to her, but she got mouthy. We thought maybe a quick chat with the police would help her understand that this behavior isn't acceptable." The older officer raised his brow. "For a 5-year-old, ma'am, we don't typically conduct behavior chats with children who aren't even in kindergarten. We're required to respond, but honestly, calls like this are not what emergency services are for." Charlotte's composure broke then. She cried softly, her tears soaking into my blouse. The officer looked at me with sympathy. "There's nothing here that warrants further action. We'll document the statements. No signs of harm. We recommend handling situations like this privately in the future." He turned directly to my mother, and without calling law enforcement unnecessarily. "You're not opening a case?" Kendra asked defensively. "No, ma'am. And let me be clear, if this happens again, it could be considered misuse of emergency services. We have real emergencies. Please don't waste our time." Then he smiled gently at Charlotte. "You're okay. No one's taking you anywhere. Sometimes kids want the same toy, but pushing isn't how we solve it. It doesn't make you bad. Just talk about it, okay?" Charlotte nodded faintly into my shoulder. The officers left their boots echoing down the hallway, leaving silence heavy enough to choke on. "You've lost your minds," I said. "Calling the police on a 5-year-old? Over a toy." "Not over a toy," Phyllis snapped. "Over aggression. You spoil her. Kids like that become problems in school. And grandmothers like you?" I shot back, "Become stories therapists unravel for years. What kind of adult terrifies a child with cops?" "She needed consequences," my mother insisted. "I told her if she didn't stop, the police would take her away." "That's not a threat, it's the truth." "You told her strangers would take her away when I wasn't here. You know she's terrified of strangers. Maybe now she'll think twice." Phyllis shrugged. "Think twice." I clutched Charlotte tighter. "No. Now you can think twice. You're never alone with her again. Not you. Not Kendra. We're done." "Mallory, come on, we were trying to help." "You don't even realize what you did. She wasn't fighting over a toy. She was protecting her space. You showed her that standing up for herself makes her a criminal." I raised my hand. "Enough. We're done." That night at home, I washed Charlotte's hair, helped her into pajamas, and opened her favorite dragon book. I stumbled over the words because my brain replayed the officers, the shaking, the fear in her eyes. "You know who my favorite is?" I asked, pointing to the page. "The princess. Not the dragon, not the knight. The princess. Because she doesn't wait to be rescued." Charlotte was quiet, then whispered, Grandma said if I told you you'd be upset, that you'd be ashamed of me. I closed the book, held her face. First of all, pushing isn't okay, even if someone grabs your toy. But that doesn't make you bad. And no, I'm not upset, and I will never be ashamed of you. Her eyes searched mine. Really? Really, I promised. I'm always on your side, always. If you mess up, we talk about it. Just us. No strangers. No threats. No guilt. Deal. She nodded and nestled into my shoulder. I stayed there listening to her breathing, realizing how close I had come to leaving her with people who didn't see her, didn't love her the way I did. I thought I had given her family. Instead, I had handed her to strangers with familiar faces. As she drifted off, my mind rewound years. Childhood under Phyllis was cold, polished, barren. Emotions were weakness. Her motto, "Don't make a scene, behave with dignity." My father was kind but quiet, a background presence who winked in solidarity, yet never interfered. Kendra mirrored Phyllis so closely, it was like she studied an instruction manual. I was the difficult one, meaning I had opinions and tears. At 19, I left. At 27, I had Charlotte alone, after a short marriage to a man who preferred absence to fatherhood. And after my father's death, grief tricked me into believing my mother wanted connection. She brought a rotisserie chicken once, and I convinced myself it was an olive branch. I let her in. Slowly, I let her watch Charlotte, then Kendra too, convincing myself I was building a family for my daughter. But tonight, watching Charlotte sleep, I saw the truth. My mother had not changed. My sister had not grown. They still wanted children who fit their script. Charlotte didn't. She was loud, bright, real, and to them, that was unacceptable. I whispered into her hair, "Never again. I'll never hand you over to their judgment again." The first 5 days after that incident were eerily quiet, like the house itself was holding its breath. No calls, no texts, no staged photos of Nora playing the role of perfect granddaughter. Charlotte slept through the night for the first time in weeks. I even dared to believe I could live without the weight of low-grade guilt pressing on my ribs. But day 5 shattered that silence. I opened my email over morning coffee and saw a notification. You have successfully canceled your recurring payment of $278 to Kendra Wallace's loan account. It was a reminder of a decision I had made days earlier, cutting off the car loan autopay I had been foolishly carrying for 2 years. I closed the laptop and exhaled. Here we go. The first text arrived within hours. "Hey Mel, did you forget the payment didn't go through today?" Probably a glitch. No, Kendra, not a glitch. Just the end of your free trial of my generosity. I didn't reply. Silence was my new favorite language. 3 hours later, Mom chimed in. "Mallory, I'm concerned. The utility transfer didn't come through. We're having another issue. The water heater's leaking. I already called someone, but the bill's due. Maybe your card declined." Utilities? Of course. For months, I'd been sending her a set amount every month, money supposedly earmarked for bills. Yet every time there was a new story: broken meter, shutoff notice, expensive plumber. Deep down, I knew the bills weren't the problem. The money was, and I'd been too tired to argue, too soft to ask questions, too afraid of being labeled heartless. This time, I didn't respond. I canceled the auto pay for her health insurance too. The next day, they escalated. Kendra showed up at my apartment door with Nora in tow. I was spooning star-shaped mac and cheese into bowls when the knock came. Charlotte, sensing the energy, pressed herself against my side. Kendra stood in the doorway, avoiding eye contact. "We were just nearby," she began, her voice tight, and I thought maybe we should talk. "There's nothing to talk about," I replied, slicing cucumbers for Charlotte. "Mel, you know I don't have the income you do. I've got a kid." She glanced at Nora, then back at me. "You've got Mom. You've got support. You're doing fine. We're struggling." Her eyes brimmed with practiced tears. Nora sniffled on cue, looking at Charlotte's plate, as though she hadn't eaten in days. "You're really not going to help anymore?" Kendra asked, her tone sharpening. "Nope. And if you're hoping to guilt me using your daughter, don't." The silence after that was heavier than words. She left without saying goodbye. A few hours later, Mom called. Her voice was sharp, cold, rehearsed. "So, this is your final decision?" "Yeah." "So you're just leaving us in a difficult position?" "No, I'm simply no longer sponsoring your lifestyle. You're grown women. You'll manage." "This is petty. Punishing the whole family over one misunderstanding." "That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was police involvement in a toddler tantrum." "Don't minimize it. You're exaggerating. And you're in denial." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I'm done." "Well," she snapped, "don't be surprised when there are consequences." I almost laughed. "What consequences, Mom? That you'll boycott Thanksgiving, where I'm the only one who cooks terrifying." Later that night, Kendra sent one more message. "Sorry I came by. We're just in a really tough spot. I thought you still wanted Nora to have an aunt for Charlotte to have a cousin. But I guess that doesn't matter to you." It mattered. It mattered deeply that Charlotte have people in her life who were safe and kind. But those people weren't in this family. And I wasn't going to keep handing my daughter over to a world where love came with threats and shame. I didn't reply. The real fun began after a week of silence. When I picked up Charlotte from preschool, the usual warm smiles from other parents had vanished. Whispers replaced greetings. A PTA queen who normally clung to me for gluten-free lunch hacks suddenly looked past me as though I were invisible. In the coat room, conversations froze when I walked in. Finally, one mom mustered a tight smile. Everything okay with you guys?" Translation: "We were just gossiping about you." Miss Sanders, the lead teacher, emerged. "Mallory, can I speak with you privately?" We stepped aside. Charlotte fiddled with her mittens near her cubby. "There's no problem with Charlotte," Miss Sanders assured me. "She's kind, cooperative, social." But two parents approached me concerned after receiving a screenshot. Something about a police incident alleging behavioral issues. I closed my eyes. The smear campaign had begun. "You want to know where that came from?" I asked. "Only if you'd like to share." My mother and sister called the police on my 5-year-old because she didn't want to share a toy. Now they're trying to shame her and me into compliance. Miss Sanders said nothing, just gave a slow nod, the kind of nod that comes from having seen far too much. That night, Charlotte's father called, rattled by a message he'd received. "What's going on? Something about the police?" I explained briefly. His reaction swung from alarm to opportunism. "Maybe she'd be better off with me." I almost laughed. You've spent 5 years sending support checks and forgetting birthdays. Payments don't make a parent. You want custody? Good luck. But let's be honest, you don't even know her." He hung up, leaving silence in his place. The next day, Kendra waited at the preschool gates. "This isn't mature," she hissed. "You just stopped helping. No warning." "Oh, and you gave me a heads up when you called the cops on my 5-year-old. That was Mom, her idea. And you just stood there. That makes you complicit." She looked down. I exhaled. "You're a mom too, Kendra." Imagine if Nora was sitting alone, shaking, and someone called strangers to intimidate her. How would you feel? She had no answer. Just grabbed Nora's hand and walked away. That night, as Charlotte brushed her teeth, she asked quietly, "Are they not coming anymore?" I knelt. "No, baby, they're not. And if they try, I'll protect you. Always." The following morning, I requested a meeting with the preschool director. I laid everything out, the police call the threats the smear campaign. I demanded clear boundaries, no unapproved pickups, no anti-visits, no sweet-voiced ambushes. She nodded and put it in writing. Then I went home, opened my laptop, and filed for a temporary restraining order. Just like online shopping, 2 names, 1 reason attached, screenshots processing in 5 business days. On Thursday, they were served. For the first time in months, my phone didn't buzz with demands. My door stayed quiet. My child smiled without checking my face first. That evening, Charlotte drew a rainbow on her bedroom wall. "Can I add a dragon?" she asked. "Only if he's kind," I said. "He will be. He'll protect the rainbow." She made him green. I watched her draw wrapped in a blanket with tea and realized that for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. Not of calls, not of gossip, not of guilt bombs. The air was clean. The retaliation shifted from loud drama to small, sharp jabs. My car tires were mysteriously slashed one at a time, just enough to cost me $170 here, another $200 there. My mailbox was stuffed with shredded paper like some childish prank. And then, just as quickly, it all stopped. The silence was worse because it made me brace every time the phone buzzed or a shadow crossed my window. But in that quiet, something unexpected bloomed. I noticed how my mornings felt lighter. No one demanding money. No messages dripping guilt. Just me and Charlotte pouring cereal, packing lunches, walking to preschool. I started attending the library's free finance nights on Tuesdays, sitting in the back like a quiet observer, learning how to own my own life. And slowly the numbers began to make sense. I opened the family fallout folder on my laptop. In 2 years, I had drained over $11,000 into my sister's car and my mother's endless utilities. Now with autopays canceled and my boundaries intact, that money stayed put. I looked at what I'd invested into Charlotte's safety groceries, tuition support, a sturdy lock on the door, and for the first time, the math favored us. One evening, Charlotte sprawled on the rug, drawing with her crayons. "Can I make the dragon bigger?" she asked. "Of course," I said. She sketched wildly, filling the rainbow with a fierce green guardian. "He's watching for bad people. He won't let them in." I swallowed hard. "That's right. He'll guard you." And maybe I thought so will I. The smear campaign at school hadn't stopped. I overheard parents whispering in the parking lot, their voices slicing the air like blades. But Miss Sanders, the lead teacher, held firm. "Charlotte is kind, helpful, gentle," she told me one afternoon. "If anyone's spreading lies, it's not the children." I nodded, grateful. "It's adults with too much time and too little shame." Then came the fraud alert. A dealership in the next town flagged an auto loan attempt in my name. The application was denied because of the credit freeze I'd wisely placed after cutting my family off. I called the dealership. They described a woman, no ID, claiming she was authorized to apply under my name. They wouldn't say her name, but I didn't need them to. It was Kendra. I filed the report calmly, almost clinically. Then I went back to cooking dinner because nothing, absolutely nothing, was going to derail the life I was building with my daughter. Later that week, Uncle Brad cornered me in the grocery store by the egg aisle. He leaned in, whispering like he was delivering state secrets. "Your mom says you drained the family accounts, that you sold the house out from under them." I laughed, sharp and bitter. "The house was in my name for 4 years." He nodded, lowering his voice. "Between you and me, not everyone buys their story. We know they've been dramatic since forever. Most of us are staying out of it, but not everyone thinks you're the villain." I smiled faintly. It wasn't validation I needed, but it was something. A few days later, my cousin Allie bought me coffee downtown. "They're telling people you turned your back on the family, that you betrayed them. But honestly, they always expected too much from you." Her words landed softer, but they carried weight. People were noticing. The story was changing even if my mother and sister refused to admit it. Back at home, I updated the petty folder with photos of the slashed tires and receipts. Not because I planned to use them, just because having proof gave me peace. Meanwhile, Charlotte was blossoming. She learned the alphabet, braided her doll's hair, and covered her ceiling with glow-in-the-dark stars. She started sleeping without fear. When she asked for pancakes on a Tuesday night, I said yes. We laughed when the first one folded in half like a letter. Her joy was proof enough that I'd made the right choice. One night, she asked quietly, "Mom, are Grandma and Aunt Kendra coming back?" I tucked her in tighter. "Sometimes people change, baby, but even if they do, we still guard our rainbow. Always." She thought about that for a long time. Then she said, "Can we put a star for them?" just in case. We stuck a tiny glow-in-the-dark star near the door. The next morning, I received a letter, not an email, not a text, but a hand-delivered envelope with no stamp. It was from my mother. She wrote that she hoped I was okay, that she missed how things used to be, that Dad would be upset if he were here. Then at the bottom, like an afterthought, "Please don't hurt the family anymore." I stared at that line until the words blurred. Hurt the family. After everything they'd done to my daughter, after the fear they'd carved into her heart, I carried the letter onto the balcony, lit a match, and watched the flames reduce it to ash. The air smelled cleaner after. Weeks turned into months. Kendra missed more payments. Her car was repossessed. Mom sent texts about her sky-high utility bills, about insurance being unfair. I didn't respond. Their problems were no longer my responsibility. Instead, I focused on Charlotte. At preschool, she helped a classmate whose ponytail had fallen out, offering her own hair tie. "We can try again," she told the crying girl. When Miss Sanders told me, I nearly cried myself, because despite everything, my daughter's kindness had survived. That night, Charlotte looked up at me with her wide eyes. "Mom, are we safe now?" I kissed her forehead. "Yes, baby, we're safe." And for the first time, I truly believed it. Months passed, and with them came the kind of peace I used to think belonged only to other people. The silence that once felt menacing turned steady, like the hum of a refrigerator in the background, ordinary, dependable. There were no knocks on my door, no calls demanding money, no passive-aggressive texts about family obligations. I had stopped waiting for the next blow. I had stopped waiting, period. Charlotte thrived in that silence. She mastered her alphabet, tied her shoelaces without help, and asked to paint rainbows across her wall. I bought washable paint and handed her the brush. Her laughter filled the apartment as streaks of red, blue, and green stretched across her room. "The dragon's guarding it," she said matter-of-factly. "He makes sure no bad people come in." I nodded. That's his job, and mine too. Meanwhile, my mother's attempts to pull me back into orbit dwindled. A few scattered texts about her health, about bills she couldn't pay, about the unfairness of the system. Each one landed with less force than the last. Kendra's silence was heavier. Without the car, she walked to her night shifts and begged neighbors to babysit Nora. The life she had once leaned on me to maintain was cracking, and instead of feeling guilt, I felt relief. Because it wasn't my job to fix it. It had never been. Occasionally, whispers reached me through extended family. Uncle Brad would murmur in a grocery aisle, "Most of us think you did the right thing." Cousin Allie bought me coffee and said, "They always expected too much of you." Their words didn't sting the way they once would have. They didn't even soothe. They just drifted past like background noise. For the first time, I didn't need validation from anyone but myself. One Saturday, Charlotte and I spent the afternoon chalking the sidewalk outside our building. She drew castles and rainbows, hopscotch squares, and a giant green dragon curling protectively around it all. An elderly neighbor watched from her steps and finally smiled. "That's a very kind dragon," she said. Charlotte nodded proudly. "He guards my rainbow." The neighbor winked at me. "Good. Then he knows his job." That evening, Charlotte sat at the kitchen table, tongue poking from the corner of her mouth as she concentrated on copying letters into her notebook. "Mom," she asked softly, "do you think Grandma and Aunt Kendra will ever come back?" I paused, then sat beside her. "Maybe. People can change. But whether they do or not, we keep guarding our rainbow. Always." She thought about that, then whispered, "Can we put another star, just in case?" So we stuck a tiny glow-in-the-dark star near the door. Her gesture wasn't forgiveness, it was hope. And I realized the difference matters. When the court hearing extended the restraining order, I walked home under a blue sky that felt wider than it had in years. Paperwork couldn't give me back lost time, but it gave me boundaries. And boundaries are the skeleton of peace. At home, I updated the folders one last time, petty with photos of vandalism, family fallout, with receipts of payments that no longer drained me. Then I closed them almost ceremonially. They were part of the past. The present belonged to Charlotte. We celebrated by making pancakes for dinner. The first one flopped into a messy half-moon, and Charlotte laughed so hard she fell off her chair. That sound, the pure, unguarded joy of a child who knows she is safe, was worth more than any inheritance, any approval, any family name. Later, as I tucked her in, she whispered, "Mom, are we really safe now?" I kissed her forehead. "Yes, baby, we're safe, because we have each other." I lay in bed that night, staring at the single glow-in-the-dark star Charlotte had insisted I hang above my bed. For once, I wasn't scared of the dark. I was resting. And I realized then, forgiveness is not the goal when the harm never stops. The opposite of forgiveness is not revenge, it's distance. Distance is choosing air that's clean. Distance is teaching a child that love doesn't come with sirens. My family thought fear would make their world sturdier. Instead, it taught me to build a different one. Thank you for listening to our story. If it resonated with you, please like this video, share it with someone who might need courage to draw their own boundaries. Subscribe for more powerful true stories, and comment with the bravest boundary you've ever held.